I have so many questions, but let's kind of just start with you. One thing that was really interesting, what comes first, the lawyering or the data sciencing?
So I was studying philosophy, theology, political science, history, like all the things that were farthest away from math as could be possible. I got recruited to go work for the CIA during my senior year. And they said, we want you to come work in a new data analytics shop.
I just think that's really great to help customers navigate the reasonableness requirement from that perspective, because projects, multi-million dollar projects just get totally jammed up on like, how do we get started and still stay compliant?
Biggest risk is that companies try to defend the way they have historically been successful. Because this is not that period. This is a period of time where we have access to, you're not going to just unplug a person and plug in a bot. Mm-hmm. What's happening is that you're taking a person who has experience, training, acumen, and you are augmenting and extending that human acumen by surrounding them with enabling technology like an Iron Man suit.
Welcome, Bennett Borden. We're really excited to welcome you to BetterTech today to talk about AI and the law.
Thank you very much. It's a delight to be here.
Now, you're taking a very special approach at Clarion AI Partners. Tell us a little bit about that just to get started.
So at Clarion, we are an AI boutique law firm. And so we have all the lawyers at our law firm are lawyers and data scientists, as I am. And so we have a deep background in the confluence of AI technology and law. We've combined that acumen to give legal advice to our clients, especially in a very fluid regulatory environment. But we also are a development shop. So we will build AI-based solutions for clients, everything from giant end-to-end systems down to little tiny agents that take over one specific task in a larger workflow. But because we are lawyers, we build compliance by design. And so, as we'll talk more during this podcast, being able to prove that your AI system is acting within parameters is really what where all your defensibility comes in, regardless of where regulation is headed.
Wow, I have so many questions, but let's kind of just start with you. One thing that was really interesting, what comes first, the lawyering or the data sciencing?
For me, it was a strange. I thought I was headed one way and went another. So I was in a university and I had put together kind of my own degree studying turning points in history. And so when did a society go to war, have a revolution? How did they react to invasion, technological revolutions, things like that? And very curious about what makes a society have certain characteristics that make it go one way or another. And so I was studying philosophy, theology, political science, history, like all the things that were farthest away from math as could be possible. And then I got recruited to go work for the CIA during my senior year. And they said, we want you to come work in a new data analytics shop that we're setting up. And I thought, that's really curious because I don't know anything about data or data analytics and I hate math. I failed calculus, right? Like I don't see the match up here. And they're like, no, we got people who know how to do that stuff. What we are, and this was in the early 90s. And so what the agency was envisioning was the world was creating an entirely new set of data about people. So this was when the World Wide Web was first coming out, email was coming out of academia, cell phones were just coming on the market. And so there was this new data contrail that was being created by members of societies. And so what my job was to help figure out what we could learn about individuals and groups of individuals based on this new digital contrail they left behind. So who's a quote unquote good guy, who's a bad guy, movements, political parties, insurrectionists, and being able to identify those people, predict what they were going to do, and even influence what they were going to do. Basically, what every social media company does all day, every day today. But at the time, it was really cool, cutting edge science. So I did that for about 8 years. But then I had always intended to go to law school. So went to Georgetown University for my law degree and then went to NYU for a graduate degree in data analytics.
Ah, okay. What made you go to data analytics? She sounds like a gold-plated resume, but if without NYU.
Well, it was interesting because, I worked at the agency from 92 to about 2000, and then went to law school and worked for a decade wherein bringing data analytics to the practice of law. But by the time I got to 2015 or so, data science had completely changed. There were such advancements in the last 15 years. And so I went back to get a graduate degree so that I could learn really where the science had gone and the most
Mm-hmm.
kind of cutting edge methods of getting insight out of data.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, interesting. Covered all the bases, got all the degrees, and then what was the impetus for starting Clarion then?
So I spent all my career in big law. So I started, I graduated from Georgetown in 2004, and I went and worked for Gibson Dunn and Crutcher, which is, one of the top firms in the world. Stayed in big law, eventually ending up as a partner and chief data scientist, and global AI practice chair for DLA Piper.
Ah.
And during that time, this was when the Gen AI first came out, and so had the privilege of representing all the Gen AI companies, most of the big tech companies, dozens of the
Mm-hmm.
Fortune 500 about AI, and also was involved in these all the meetings at the White House that we heard about, and congressional hearings, and negotiations in the EU Parliament, and foreign AI ministries that were being set up, and advising, and just kind of where the technology was going and how it could be technically controlled. And I came to realize that we are at this pivotal moment in the development of AI, both the development of how do we technically control AI to align what it's
Mm-hmm.
doing with what we're trying to get it to do, right? But also uh, in regulation as well.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were positions I simply couldn't take in public, or
Right.
before regulators, representing the companies that I once did. So I decided to take me and some of my friends and my team, and we went and set up this AI boutique firm and development shop. But a lot of what we focus on is public policy,
Mm.
and education, bringing AI into the classroom, and what effect does it have on public services, and what are the uh, effective methods of regulating AI. So it's been just a tremendous journey.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've worked with a lot of regulators over the years building like very large scale data and AI systems in finance, which is highly regulated and overlapping regulations. Who are your customers today? Are they mostly like Fortune 1000? Are they like the hyperscalers? I'm sure you're going to say all of them, but like commonly, what are you seeing right now in terms of who your customer is?
I was very fortunate that a lot of my clients came with me.
Okay.
And so we're still working with some of the world's biggest companies on AI strategy, but especially AI implementation. How do you actually build, or procure AI to solve a particular problem? But we're working across multiple industries,
Okay.
very data centric industries. So obviously
Hmm.
financial services, insurance, and now labor and employment. There's a lot of focus on like HR platforms
Right.
that are using algorithms or generative AI to sort through resumes. There's a lot of attention being placed around there. And
Right. Right.
so really companies of any size, but typically those who are a little more mature, have a lot of data. That data forms the basis of their decision making or their products.
Hmm.
And then those really CEOs who recognize this as the watershed moment that it is.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And I love this idea of like baking in compliance by design early on, because the big problem that I see with customers, and you're right, those who have kind of gotten over the first excitement of implementing AI, or they've done a couple of experiments. Maybe they do have their arms around most or some of their data, and they really want to expand. They're jammed up on kind of what problems to solve first. And one of them really is sort of fundamentally in the olden days. the systems were deterministic. With a lot of
Yeah.
work, you could sort of figure out what happened. However, now they're non-deterministic. And so I'm just curious, how do you see customers kind of, and then it seems like the policy is really not defined enough for a non-deterministic system. So it seems like a rock and a hard place. How are you navigating that?
That is such a great point. That is exactly where the problem is. So CEOs are feeling this pressure, right? That everyone tells them that AI is the most transformative technology since sliced bread, and that they see their competitors, they see all the headlines, and they feel some pressure to do something, but they're not quite sure what to do. And that comes from a couple of places. One is understanding how AI can be baked into your workflows
Mm-hmm.
to optimize what you do as a company. And the other is we're in just a very fluid regulatory environment. There's not set up rules, there's not set standards. Even when you start to get alignment, which you do really across the world, that these ideas that these things should be fair, accurate, reliable, transparent, explainable, right? You see these principles in all the top risk management frameworks, but what does that mean in a particular industry? Like fair means something very different in
In
underwriting algorithm for insurance for
right,
baking, right, than it does for a
college
social
admit
media
college
algorithm
admissions or
or
something. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah, right. And
yeah,
so
yeah.
there's no agreed upon standard, much less how do I mathematically measure that?
Some of these ideas are just real mom and apple pie, right? Where you're just like, of course I agree to that. But then, and I think there's a lot of hand waviness. I'm on the tech side. I'm like, oh, we'll just figure out how to do it. But really, no one's figured it out yet entirely. There's a few good,
And
I think, directions in identity and data, but there's some big concerns as well, that like bias and hallucination, which really hasn't
yeah,
been addressed, though we talk about it all the time. So give me a sense of like, how are you, here's what I wanted to understand is, okay, how are you engaging with your clients? Are they coming to you just saying, we have this generalized problem, we have a business concern, and then how does that move into, hey, we're going to build something for you?
there's really two entryways that we tend to get clients, right? So one is the AI strategic vision. Like, how
Mm-hmm,
do
mm-hmm,
companies decide how to decide to use AI? Right.
mm-hmm.
So there's kind of this governance layer where there's some kind of AI steering committee and an AI policy. But the real meat of it is a AI use case approval process.
Mm-hmm.
So when someone comes and says, "Hey, I've got this great idea to use AI," how do you formally assess the benefits and risks? Can I reasonably mitigate those risks? And can I prove it? That is the ultimate purpose of an AI governance program.
Mm-hmm.
The other way we have people come in is I've got to build. We've got this great idea and I want to build something.
My
And
CEO, my
so
CEO just promised this to the board.
and you can't like this is the good news about this is even though the world is in this, especially in the US, we're in a very fluid
Mm-hmm.
regulatory environment. It's almost like a legal greenfield. And many times that will paralyze lawyers. Like lawyers as a group, we
That's right.
love rules. We want, if there's a black letter law, if there's a court decision and someone comes and says, what's the answer? We can like, there's the answer. The problem is when you don't have that clarity, how do you give advice to your clients? And
Right.
so the secret of this is everything falls back on reasonableness.
Mm-hmm.
So what, even Melissa Holyoke, who's one of the new FTC commissioners, she gave a keynote address a couple weeks ago. And it was really the first time that the FTC has come out in the new administration and said, "Hey, here's what we believe about AI."
Mm-hmm.
And what she focused on was be responsible, right? If
Right.
you're building something, you should be able to predict what are the reasonably foreseeable risks that you're introducing into the market by your use of AI. Well, and then what can you do to reasonably mitigate, like literally measure the impact? You can any black box, even black box solutions, you can still measure where your touch of the world happens.
Yes, I think it's
And
such an interesting point, and I want to talk about paralysis as well. On the, I work with a lot of implementers and leaders who are you get jammed up when they have to show that they are trying to be compliant early on.
yep,
Um, you need to show it, underline show. You don't need to be perfectly compliant. I've worked with leaders who are like, we must know everything about every piece of data and every decision. I'm like, that would be great, but we
but this is
probably
not
aren't going to be
possible.
able to do it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so I just think that's really great to have to help customers navigate the reasonableness requirement from that perspective, because yeah, projects, multi-million dollar projects, just get totally jammed up on like how do we get started and still stay compliant. And what you're saying is you're the fire starter there, where you can help them.
Yes, and to get CEOs to realize that they know more than they think they do.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's interesting to when you start to go in and the C-suite, they're just a bit flummoxed. They're like, I don't know how to think through the risk. And
Yeah.
I'm like, sure you do. You already operate in whatever regulatory rubric that you do. You already have rules of the road. You already have controls to make sure you're in compliance with those. And so the question, you don't have to start all over. The question is, how does my introduction of AI change my risk profile? And can I measure that, detect it, measure it, control it to the point where I'm satisfied to accept that risk
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
or not?
So there's a definitely like a therapy component. I'm picking up on that.
So
And
much.
let me ask you this: like, what do you see? It'd be interesting just to get your opinion, because there's a lot of people who are like, AI is just going to be a security and risk juggernaut. There's others who sort of feel like it's a little bit worse, more fraud, but it's similar to what we have today. What do you see as the kind of new risks that adopting AI may bring to commercial ventures?
I think there's much more opportunity than risk. Like I am a huge, huge fan of the transformative nature of AI.
Mm-hmm.
What we're learning though is that um, buying something off the shelf, using any of the commercially available tools, even kind of narrow um, software solutions that are bolting on AI capabilities,
Mm-hmm.
you get some really good marginal benefit out of those things, right? Copilot, GPT, Claude, pick your point, right? There,
Mm-hmm.
if you allow your workers access to these kind of technologies, you'll get this marginal bump. The problem is it's available to everybody. So the only real advantage you get is first mover advantage, and that disappears pretty quickly. If everybody
Mm-hmm.
can buy it, if everybody's special, nobody's special, right? And
Right.
so we're starting to hit this disillusionment trough, but it's really an awakening for that companies finally understand the real way to transform my business is to build AI agents, bots, whole systems, right? It's how we take our acumen as a company and extend it and enlarge it by surrounding us with this enabling technology. So the risks, the what I say the biggest risk is that companies try to defend the way they have historically been successful.
Yeah.
Because this is not that period. This is a period of time where have access to, honestly, I think the world's most impactful technology since electricity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And this is not a time where you can sit back and wait, but lean into it.
That's right. I think there's going to be, like, not to put too fine a point on it, but there are going to be sort of winners and losers at this juncture. You said you spent
100%.
your studies like at big changes in history. I think we're in part of one at the moment. So I agree with you. I'm an AI maximalist. I do think it's a little bit different territory though, and people, the degree to which they pivot, the velocity at which you can adopt does matter at the moment.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this though, because I've shipped a lot of software products over my career, and if I was on your team, you're like, okay, we're going to build for Big Co, and you've got a bunch of technical teams, you've got a bunch of governance teams, you've got cyber showing up. This sounds like a difficult meeting. What's your thought about integrating these technical, non-technical policy teams all together? Because I would imagine they all have to be there.
They do. They absolutely all have to be there. And the key, this is where the corporate therapy comes in. So
Mm-hmm.
we call it kind of corporate kung fu, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's very important that you get the perspectives of each of those key players, right? So that's why we encourage the formation of something like an AI steering committee. Where we see the problems come in is when that committee is not properly balanced with
Mm.
perspectives. A lot of times companies will come in and they will heavily weight it on the compliance side. So risk, legal, because security, privacy, like they're all concerned. The business is there to do something and to make money and be successful. And so you've got to have the business people there. And so the key to a good AI advisor is being able to understand that every person at that table has a valuable line of sight and it's legitimate. And so it's eliciting their line of sight and helping them all understand each other and understand that we can both take advantage of this amazing technology and we can control it.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
people think the cool thing about AI solutions is that it is a technical solution, which means it is amenable to technical controls.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
the secret, so many companies will have this great idea and they will build an AI agent or a bot to do something, but they don't build in metrics to prove that the solution is staying within whatever parameters you've established. And when I come in and do an independent third party audit, like we'll come in after the fact and audit somebody's AI system,
Mm-hmm.
it is so much harder if they haven't built in dials and measurements. And like, I can't, it's like if you go check the oil, your car, the dipstick makes that really easy. Right?
Right, right.
Without a dipstick, without something, the measuring device built into the system, it makes it so much harder for me to prove that that system has been acting in
For these large
accordance with
scale efforts,
parameters.
I always say sort of beginnings matter, the start matters,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
You can recover it, but it's very painful.
It is very painful and much more
Um,
expensive.
right. Unfortunately, in the tech world, I certainly know that's true. I only imagine how much in policy and law as well. But so we're talking a little bit about leadership and strategy, and you're working with leaders. You're creating these AI strategies without revealing anything. Sort of at a general level. What are companies? How are like where are they investing first? Certainly software development seems to be one thing. What are you seeing at a trend level?
So there is a lot of interest in kind of these generally available tools. So, whether it's Copilot, which is baked into the Microsoft
Mm-hmm,
suite,
mm-hmm.
which makes all kinds of efficiency gains and recording of your meetings and summaries of to-do lists, right?
Right.
Just access to enterprise versions of some of these models, right? You're seeing where companies are kind of experimenting with that.
Mm-hmm.
The easiest application of when you're starting to kind of self-build AI solutions are kind of knowledge repositories. So whether it's like an internal facing chatbot like Ask HR, right? Something very simple, to more complex, like how do I interact with my customers or consumers? So building an assistant or a chatbot around a product,
Mm-hmm.
like pick here's the latest pharmaceutical. And so you build a bot that customers or potential customers can interact with to understand all the information you have about that
Mm-hmm.
product. But where we're really starting to see the trend is companies identifying tasks within their workflows that are data centric, highly repetitive, and are applying the same judgments.
Mm-hmm.
Those tasks are highly amenable to optimization by AI. Like, for example, at my prior firm, one of my jobs was to figure out what the effect of AI was on the practice of law. And after a great deal of analysis, it came out that about 80% of what a lawyer does today is better done by AI.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the 20% is really super critical. Like it's absolutely essential. And so it's not like what I tell people all the time is think Iron Man, not Terminator, right?
Right.
You're not going to just unplug a person and plug in a bot.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening is that you're taking a person who has experience, training, acumen, and you are augmenting and extending that human acumen by surrounding them with enabling technology like an Iron Man suit.
Kind of liberating them. You know, I feel this way about finance. You know, I want all these young people to have entry level jobs, certainly, but a lot of the work they do with these gold
Yeah.
plated educations is probably not the right work product. If you know, I think what we're hearing from you is definitely you're an AI maximalist, and so it might be a repetitive, just across your business certainly, but also in your personal life. What kind of excites you the most about the forefront of AI technology?
I love the idea that you can capture not only your own experience and acumen, but that these large language models are the largest compendium of human knowledge that have ever been assembled.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you think about that these models are based upon trillions of examples of how we expressed ourselves in language. Well, we express everything we understand about the universe in
Mm-hmm.
language, physics, metaphysics, biology, theology, whatever, right? And so we actually have a model of all of the knowledge of the human race that's been put into these systems and a whole lot of junk. But so the trick is you know, how do you get the good stuff out for you and
Mm-hmm.
control the other stuff? But I think like the most interesting trends are that you can take years, decades worth of acumen and experience from your company and build it into these AI solutions so that it frees up people it drives capacity, it drives margins, and it allows consistency across decision making. And so it frees up human capital to push forward into new frontiers
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
almost.
Yeah, that's an exciting point of view. So as I'm just kind of walking through, is there something that the CEO who's listening to this right now, who's maybe feeling that sense of paralysis, like what advice do you have other than call you immediately?
it,
Like what would be the pillars of the thought process if you're just jammed up? You know, everybody wants it, but the board wants it. You know.
It's really one, understanding what your business does and where are this is what I always ask CEOs. What is your biggest pain point? What keeps you up at night? What are you most afraid of? Where's your biggest clog, right? And the other is if you had a magic wand and tomorrow could solve a problem or create a thing, if this was your wildest dream for your company, what would that be? And what you'll find is those two things are often very related, and
Mm-hmm.
almost every time they are AI addressable.
Hmm.
It's important to understand what AI can do, but more importantly, what is the latest thinking on how to make it do what you want it to do. So,
Okay.
like, if you're worried about accuracy and hallucinations, great. Then set up a retrieval augmented generation database that has well curated data that is your company's crown jewels of knowledge. Point a model at that,
Mm-hmm.
write a constitution, use constitutional AI to control exactly how it behaves, and then have a bunch of QC processes in the adversarial bot, kind of warrior bot, and that's your recipe. Like, you can measure just about any risk and you can prove that the outcomes are correct, accurate, aligned with your values,
You know, Bennett,
etc.
it's really interesting what you're pulling up here, which is I'm not going to say a contrarian point of view, but it's different from a lot of what I hear and see out there. And I'm going to talk about that and just jump in and interrupt me. First of all, I think what's fundamentally so interesting about what you're saying is look at the core parts of your business where you make money. So many organizations are starting with these like very risk averse activities or little side projects that they think are low risk, and so I love that. I really feel like when we have these transformational technologies, it's got to be at the heart of your real business, not just like risk management
Yeah,
immediately.
absolutely. And it's, sometimes look, this is new. Tech groups at the company typically don't understand. They
Mm-hmm.
haven't done this before, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
having a little practice run or a sandbox or two to get the concepts down about how to, as the NIST risk management framework says, map, measure, manage your risk, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not until you get into the guts of what you do that you're going to see true superseding, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
almost like, in Mario Kart, when you hit one of those accelerator pads and you go, and you fly off, right? That is what AI can do for you. And you can absolutely move forward when the law isn't clear. There's
Right.
any lawyer that tells you, it frustrates me to death when I hear a CEO or a board say, well, the lawyers are saying
Lawyers are
no.
stopping us.
Right. First of all, lawyers, it's not their job to say yes or no. It's their job to identify and quantify risk, and then for the business to decide if it wants to take on that risk.
Yeah.
If your lawyers are afraid and hesitant, now you want them to be calibrated properly, but if they are just so afraid they're paralyzed, get better advice.
Well, I also think it's leadership. Many years ago I was at Microsoft and something happened and I talked to the lawyers and it was pointed out to me that it's still my decision on the business side, which made me
Exactly.
feel quite ill. However, however, I do think even at like VP plus level, I feel like the role of corporate legal advice, yeah, they're not gatekeepers. Like we still have to make a business decision. So I really love that approach and I love that thought process on your part. And then I also think, I'm a technology person. So the idea that there are deep technical approaches and solutions that really can address some of the biggest concerns around cost of inference and
Yeah.
particularly securing data, I think is one of the biggest worries out
Yeah, and
there.
you really can deal with those problems, right? And believe it or not, um, new AI, generative AI, and hybrid systems are actually much, much easier to build than kind of old-fashioned classical AI
Right.
algorithmic recommendation systems. Old algorithms, man, you spent tens of thousands of lines of code and you controlled every teeny tiny little thing that it did. With these Gen AI solutions, it is what I tell CEOs all the time is that the limits of what this can do for your company are not technological, they're psychological, right? That they're
Mm-hmm.
these, it is mind blowing what these, especially new deep reasoning models can do. And you can absolutely control how they behave and every decision that comes out of them when it touches the world, you can measure that touch and that touch, whether it's an employee, a customer, the public,
Yeah.
that's where your liability comes in. And you can measure that regardless of the black boxedness of a model that you're using.
Yeah, I think that's right. We have to do a separate show about this, but I actually think the idea of automating your business with AI is a broken idea in some ways because it's just there are places where it's going to just reformat the whole thing.
That's right.
And so I actually, for myself, I don't know if you feel this way, but for myself, I challenge myself to think like, oh, am I thinking about this big enough or in like an exotic enough fashion to really leverage
Exactly.
AI? Yeah. Okay, well, it's been absolutely great chatting with you. Such an interesting area. Before we move on, I want to move on to some rapid fire questions.
All
Is
right.
there anything I should have asked you that I didn't, or?
No, I think you covered this great. Like the biggest message I would say is don't be afraid. Lean into this. Don't don't fall into the trap of defending the way you have historically been successful. If you're just trying to do what you do today faster and more efficiently, that's not good enough. You've
Mm-hmm.
got to understand how this can transform and create new products and services. That is what will distinguish you because everybody else is going to be doing the same thing.
Someone's going to figure it out. That's
Yeah.
right. All right. So these are just quick rapid fire questions. What's one industry you think AI will completely transform?
Most of the knowledge working class. I
Mm-hmm.
think lawyers, teachers, content creators, educators of all kinds, right? Like we are dealers in information. When I was studying the effects of AI on the practice of law, it is an existential threat to the way we have practiced law
Right.
for since the 1700s, right? We
Right.
throw people at bodies at a problem and bill by the hour for it. That's insanity, right? Um,
I feel that
and
way
it,
about a lot of software. When I think about it, I'm like, oh, actually, we built to the machine. that we
Right.
had.
Right.
And maybe that wasn't the best idea. So I love that. What do you think really separates a good leader from a great leader?
It's not just understanding where you need to go, but how do I surround myself and motivate the people who share that vision?
Hmm.
How do I stay humble enough to listen to contrary opinions? If you surround yourselves with sycophants, you have much greater chance of falling into a ditch than if you
Mm-hmm.
have someone who will stand up and say, "Hey, I think you're wrong on this," or "I think we need different thinking on this." So
Hmm.
be brave enough to stride, but humble enough to listen.
I like that. Um, just for you personally, do you have like a routine or habit? I mean, you're taking on a lot here,
Mm.
three huge sectors. Do you have like a routine or a habit that you think keeps you on track?
I've got a very good method of just keeping my hands on the pulse of where AI is going. We're using AI to monitor the world of what anybody says on AI all day, every day. And we have
Mm-hmm.
it's almost like a president's daily briefing that gets delivered up to me.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that keeps me personally balanced is getting away from it too. Um, AI is ultimately a benefit for humanity. And so I am very motivated by philanthropic
Mm-hmm.
access to justice, fairness is one thing. So I do a lot of projects in that area. And then I have a farm. I literally have a hobby farm that I go and dig in the dirt and where there's no data, there's no screens, and the law of the harvest works. And it's just
That's
this
funny.
wonderful, simple way to get away.
I had wanted to get a hobby farm at one point, but my husband actually grew up in a farming family, and he was like, hard pass.
Yeah, yeah, I fully understand.
Is there any tech leader, past or current, that you really look up to as a thought leader at the moment?
I love the research that comes out of Anthropic, OpenAI, and Google DeepMind. Honestly, the collective thinking and the research around
Hmm.
what AI can do, but the warnings around it, the ways to control it, it is the combined acumen of these people who are not only just building stuff that's never been built before, but are very open about here's its risks or here's its threat or don't fall in love with my model, right? Like it's very
Right.
persuasive. But the both the humility and the brilliance of those research shops is
Yeah.
something that I respect deeply.
Okay, great. Well, Bennett, it's been a pleasure catching up with you. You're in a really interesting troika of focus areas of legal, AI, and data science. More to come, I'm sure. We'd love to have you back on the show in the future.
Thank you so much. I'd love to be here again.